Did you know that the chain reaction that freed 17 African nations from colonial rule in a single year was triggered by one man and one moment in Ghana on March 6, 1957, and that the man who pulled that trigger was later overthrown by a CIA-backed coup because he was building something the West was determined to stop? Have you ever heard the full story of Kwame Nkrumah and the African independence movement? Kwame Nkrumah was born on September 21, 1909, in Nkroful, in what was then the British Gold Coast, the colony that would become Ghana. He was educated at mission schools, graduated from the government training college in Accra, and taught school before setting his sights on something larger. In 1935, he sailed to the United States to study, a journey that would take 10 years and transform him from a talented young teacher into one of the most consequential political thinkers of the 20th century. He enrolled at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, one of the oldest historically black universities in the United States, which had educated Langston Hughes and Thurgood Marshall. He earned bachelor's degrees in economics and sociology, a bachelor's of theology, and graduate degrees from the University of Pennsylvania. He lived in poverty during much of his American years, sometimes sleeping in cars, working on fishing trawlers, selling fish by the roadside to pay his bills. He read voraciously. He immersed himself in the Pan-African thought of W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, and C.L.R. James. He organized African students. He built networks. He was preparing. While American-educated black intellectuals were fighting for civil rights in America, Nkrumah was planning something larger, the liberation of an entire continent. Nkrumah returned to the Gold Coast in 1947 to serve as General Secretary of the United Gold Coast Convention, the leading political organization working toward independence from Britain. He immediately saw that the UGCC was too conservative, too tied to the educated elite, too slow. He founded his own party, the Convention People's Party, and went to the people, not the lawyers and merchants, the market women, the teachers, the workers, the farmers. He organized from the bottom up with a slogan that became a rallying cry across the entire continent: self-government now. The British arrested him in 1950 for his organizing activities. He ran for parliament from prison. He won. The British were forced to release him. In the 1951 elections, the first elections held under a new constitution that gave African voters meaningful power, the CPP won overwhelming majorities. The British transferred power. On March 6, 1957, Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to achieve independence from European colonial rule. Nkrumah stood at the podium and declared, "Ghana is free forever." He had run for parliament from a prison cell. He had won. He had walked out of prison and into a government, and the world was watching. Ghana's independence was not just a Ghanaian event, it was a signal. Nkrumah had invited African independence leaders from across the continent to Accra's independence celebration. He made it clear, this was not the end of a Ghanaian story. It was the beginning of an African one. In 1960, 3 years after Ghana, 17 African nations achieved independence in a single year. Cameroon, Senegal, Togo, Mali, Madagascar, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, Benin, Niger, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, Chad, Central African Republic, Congo-Brazzaville, Gabon, Mauritania, and Nigeria, all independent in 1 year. It is the most concentrated wave of decolonization in human history. Nkrumah had not caused all of it, but Ghana had proven it was possible. The dam broke. He convened the All-African People's Conference in Accra in 1958, bringing independence leaders together from across the continent and the diaspora, including a young South African activist named Nelson Mandela. Nkrumah's vision extended far beyond individual national independence. He understood, with crystal clarity, that political independence without economic integration was incomplete. 50-plus African nations, carved up arbitrarily by European colonizers along lines that bore no relationship to ethnic, cultural, or geographic reality, would be vulnerable individually. The only way to build genuine power was to unite. He called for a United States of Africa, a continental government with a unified military, a common currency, and an integrated economy that could negotiate with the great powers of Europe, America, and the Soviet Union as an equal, rather than as a collection of small, weak states that could be played off against each other. The United States was not going to let that happen. Ghana, under Nkrumah, accepted aid from both Western and Eastern Bloc countries, a pragmatic non-alignment that Washington interpreted as dangerous communist sympathy. The CIA opened a file on Nkrumah. Agents were inserted into his government. Anti-Nkrumah propaganda was financed. On February 24, 1966, while Nkrumah was traveling to Hanoi on a peace mission, Ghanaian military officers staged a coup with CIA support and knowledge. Nkrumah never returned to Ghana. He died in exile in Conakry, Guinea, in 1972. They overthrew him while he was on a peace mission. The CIA confirmed its involvement decades later. He was removed for dreaming too big. Even as his own government was being taken from him, the Pan-African institutional framework Nkrumah had championed was taking root. In May 1963, he had helped found the Organization of African Unity in Addis Ababa, a continental body bringing together independent African nations for political coordination and mutual defense. In 2002, the Organization of African Unity was replaced by the African Union, now comprising 55 member nations, operating as the largest regional body on Earth, with its own parliament, court of justice, and Peace and Security Council. Its founding documents explicitly reference Pan-Africanism as their philosophical foundation, the philosophy Nkrumah spent his life advancing. The CIA overthrew him for building something the West feared. That something became the African Union. His vision is now the institutional framework of a continent. And here's why this story matters. Kwame Nkrumah understood before almost anyone that the fight against colonialism was not just a fight for political boundaries. It was a fight for economic independence, for continental solidarity, for the right of African people to define their own future without the interference of powers that had spent centuries extracting their wealth. He was right about everything that mattered. He was overthrown for being right. And the institution he helped build, the African Union, carries his ideas into the present, connecting 1.4 billion people across 55 nations under a framework of continental solidarity that would have been impossible without the chain reaction he set off in Accra on March 6, 1957. They overthrew him while he was on a peace mission. His dream became the African Union. He is still winning. Follow us for more hidden Black history on MichelleDuffieTV. Like and subscribe, because these stories deserve to be told. Please comment. Did you know the CIA helped overthrow Kwame Nkrumah, and that the African Union he helped create now represents 55 nations? Drop your reaction below and tell us what your school taught you about African independence. We don't glorify injustice. We reveal truth, so history can't repeat itself.